Hello again. Those of you who've been watching my recent videos will know that I tend to work on improving speed or the shorter term powers at this time of year as we're starting to approach the main events. In fact, I remember I used to, when I coached Jenny Graham for the Round the World event, we used to have monthly meetings, and at one of the meetings she said to me that she thought she had it sort of covered in terms of the endurance, how long she could ride for, but we maybe should work on speed. And partly based on that and a review of the data, we started working on improving the shorter term powers, the FTP and the VO2 max. And I'll show you a chart of how that improved over the months coming up to the Round the World record breaking ride later in the video. And the other thing at this time of year is if your event's coming up and you've only got a couple of months before the event, what can you change? Well, you're unlikely to change your endurance fitness a lot in a short period of time of 2 or 3 months, but you can improve your FTP, your functional threshold pace, your critical pace, and that type of thing. So I mentioned earlier that in 2018, before Jenny's Round the World ride, we improved her powers quite a lot. Well, she did all the training, I just made some suggestions as to what she did. Well, I coached her, so I actually made some fairly concrete guidelines as to what to do. So you can see on the chart that she improved her FTP from 226 watts to 252 watts, so around 10% in less than 6 months. So that's a huge change in fitness and in the speed that you can ride at. And one of the more interesting, or actually impressive, things that I found when I was looking through the data to prepare for this video is that she could produce 224 watts for 5 minutes after 4,000 kilojoules of work. So that's like riding for 8 hours at 130 watts. She was still able to produce 224 watts for 5 minutes and 180 watts for 20 minutes. You can also see that the VO2 max values go up quite significantly during that period. They go up from 3.46 in the January-February period to 3.79 in the May-June period. And that's quite a big increase, it's over 10%. Okay, well, you could say, well, she's not working at a VO2 max in a round the world ride where she's riding, 200 miles a day, 300 kilometers a day or whatever she was doing. But what it does mean is she's riding at a lower percentage of her VO2 max. So she's stressing her body a lot less than she would be if she had a lower VO2 max. And the closer you get to the VO2 max, the harder you're working. So these improvements in functional threshold power in a FTP and a VO2 max made a huge difference, probably made a huge difference, we can never really know, to her round the world ride, because she was under less stress and therefore able to sustain a given level of work for a longer period of time. Okay, well, I've probably talked enough about why it's good, anecdotal information and things like that, and some actual hard data. So how do you do it? Well, usually people at a fairly sustainable volume, so if you back off a little bit, then that gives a little bit of headroom to increase the intensity. You might be able to increase, you'd increase the intensity of the interval session that they're doing each week. You might introduce another interval session in the week. Typically I'm doing 1 interval session a week, maybe 2. I probably wouldn't go up to more than 2 formal structured interval sessions per week. But what I might do is actually make one of the weekend rides what I call endurance tempo ride, where you ride hills at tempo, flats at endurance, and recover on the downhills. So you've then got 3 harder sessions each week where you're actually riding a bit faster. So it might be that if your weekend rides were 2 endurance rides, you can introduce this endurance tempo ride. Or if you're training to do shorter events, like you're training to be road races, or you're training to run a marathon or a half marathon or something like that, then actually having a formal structured interval session at the weekend is quite a good idea. So I guess you might be reluctant to take this risk to make a big change in your training at this time of year if you're within 2 or 3 months of your event. But what I suggest is, well, why don't you give it a go? See what happens. If you're noticing a big improvement, which I suspect you will do if you've been doing a very sort of endurance-based program over recent months, then you can keep going up to your event. And if you don't see any improvement, which I think is probably unlikely unless you've been doing higher intensity work up to now, then you can just go back to the endurance base, because you don't lose endurance fitness quickly. So there's very little risk in trying this type of format. The only real risk is that higher intensities bring a higher risk of injury, so you have to be a bit more careful And the other risk is overtraining. Higher intensities also increase the risk of overtraining. So be careful. If you do interval sessions, you should probably do enough intervals so that you feel you could do maybe another one at the same intensity, so you're not pushing yourself right to the limit. You don't need to push yourself right to the limit. You just have to stress yourself a bit to make a change. So be careful, give it a go, and let me know how you get on in the comments. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye.